Welcome to The Independent Artist, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists, NAIA. I'm Douglas Sigworth. I'm a glassblower.
I'm Will Armstrong, mixed media artist. Join us as we explore the topics that affect the lives and livelihood of art show artists.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Will, long time no see.
Long time no see, Douglas. Good morning. It's a beautiful summer morning, and I am in a foul mood. Let's see where this goes.
Oh boy, what happened? What's going on?
I'm fine. It's been a week of dealing with airports and flying unaccompanied minors and trying to get ready for Old Town, which is a new thing for me, trying to actually get ready for a show that I know I'm going to attend.
That's great that you're going to get there because Old Town has lifted all the restrictions.
Well, Doug, it's not just Old Town. The city of Chicago opens up on Friday.
The mayor has ended any of those kinds of restrictions so people can go about their business like before COVID.
The restrictions on crowd gathering size are now gone. So on Saturday morning, they're not going to be turning people away. And that was my big feeling about, I'm like, well, are my people going to come? It's like, do you remember when we were first doing the podcast and you put out the first episode and you're hearing from all of your friends?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is great, et cetera, et cetera. You're getting all this feedback and I'm not hearing a damn thing from any of the people that I know. And then all of a sudden, it's like 5 or 6 weeks later, they finally caught up. And I'm like, okay, well, this is the difference between my friends and your friends. They're more reactive, I guess, and yours are, and mine are like, I'll get around to it. I worry about that with my customers too. It's like, are these my kind of people? Are they going to register? Are they actually going to get up and register for the show? Are they going to show up? Are they going to buy tickets? Man, I was really worried about my folks.
Yeah. That they were like, I could just show up and get in and then be turned away. You didn't want that to happen.
No way. Can you imagine your best customers showing up with a pocket full of money and being like, sorry, you didn't get tickets.
And you can come in 2 hours.
Right. Come back after lunch. We got you slated for 1:30. It's like, that's not how art shows work. So
yeah,
I applaud them for trying and having a plan set in place, but man, I was worried about my folks showing up.
And you're not alone with this. I've talked to so many people, myself included, getting ready for these shows coming up. It's worse than being a newbie. When we were newbies, we didn't know what we didn't know, but it seems like getting ready for the shows, there's this whole new awareness and stresses of pitfalls we've had along the way, like if our Square reader won't connect to the internet or to cell service or whatever. Those are the things we're like, okay, what if that goes wrong? And what if this goes wrong?
Right.
And we're trying just to cover all our bases and make sure we've got everything prepared, and it's taking way longer.
Yeah. At some point along the line, I think I was like, well, I think I'll just unload my toolbox and clean it all out or use it for something else. So, my wife reminded me that my Square reader is actually her backup Square reader. And so she's a lot more prepared than I am. She's got the two, they're both charged. And if I'm like, a lot of times we'll be set up next to each other and I'll jump over and help her sell something minor while she's dealing with a larger client, like a larger jewel. So I'll jump over and use her backup. But man, it is a mess. So trying to build that booth in my mind and think about all the pieces that I need, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah, totally is a nightmare. But we're going to do it, feet to the fire. We'll eventually get there. And I've heard from folks at Winter Park and Artisphere who did it. They're like, yeah, it was a little bumpy at first, but then you kind of fall right into the groove and then you're just back at it again.
Yeah, I think it'll come naturally. It's like riding a bike, but as long as you remember your bike wheel and and the pedals and the gears. I know. That's what we're running into. I'm like, I don't know if I have all my crap.
I know, or I'm thinking, I hope the van actually gets to my destination. And there's just so many little components that are just flooding my brain here as we get moving forward.
I'm actually recording this with you, and then I'm going to pick up my van after $3,000 worth of exhaust work.
Yikes.
Yeah, which with a diesel and the big diesel, and I haven't actually had that much work done on it. I feel like I kind of dodged a bullet. So it's been a pretty challenging week. I am hemorrhaging money. It's like all of the things that I spend money on seem to all have their hand out right now. Like they're salivating. They're like, this asshole's getting ready to go back to work. Time to do this. It's like, oh, we could use this. We could use this service. It's like your kids at Christmas going through the catalogs like, oh, I want this. I want this. I want this. It's like, I need an exhaust system.
And booth fees. I am paying all of these booth fees for August, September, and I haven't seen credit card bills this high since before COVID. I had kind of a comfortable monthly level, and now it's back up in that super high monthly payoff for getting ready for shows, and it's kind of
I'm used to them doing that to us at Christmas time, and that could be a whole nother topic around the holidays about how like, oh, it's Christmas and you have to buy gifts, and also you have to buy a gift for your entire spring show schedule because they want $600 to $1,200 depending on what your booth is.
Totally. Hey, did you remember to pack that lucky hat?
Yeah, I've had little spots of not to be a bummer, but I've had little spots of skin cancer and things on my nose because of staying out in the sun and just having this good, just flammable white skin that I've got from my mom. Just that good Scotch Irish background that I've got. I will burst into flames.
Yeah.
People hate my hat, by the way. They're like something about my gigantic cowboy hat. Oh, it makes other artists insane. But I can sell in it, so that's all that matters. But man, I got my good friend Matt Hemminghouse, Chicken Matt, who does the amazing photography. My puppy chewed up my lucky rooster feather out of my hat. Oh. And I was like, man, where am I going to get a rooster feather chicken mat? So I've got we'll see if there's any luck in it, but I bet there is. The fact that it's an ethically sourced and eaten rooster that he sent me some feathers there. So I'm good to go with that.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I do a show and I've got that special hat on. I kind of attribute my good luck to that hat.
Do you?
And
are you superstitious?
A little bit. I mean, sometimes it's like that hat is looking pretty faded from the sun and wear, but I'm kind of nervous to swap it out sometimes because I'm thinking there's a little bit of mojo in it that's giving me the good luck.
You know what? There absolutely is. And I used to have this lucky shirt that I would wear, and it would be like, it was a red shirt, but it was kind of faded, and it was linen, so it's super loose and breathable. And I put that on, and I'm like, man, I love the shirt. And it faded to almost like, is that red, like a dusty red, or is that hot pink? And I'm like,
it went pink, yeah.
It totally went pink. And I'm like, I need another one. So I went to the same store and bought another one. Went to the next show and just had a 0 at a show that I typically do well, and just really took one on the chin. And I'm like, you know what? There's no money in this goddamn shirt, so I didn't wear the new one at all. I never wore it. I gave it away.
I get superstitious also about booth spots, and I don't even know if it's necessarily that people are coming back to find me at that spot or not. But it is funny how we assign this good luck charm. We try and recreate lightning in a bottle and
always
make it happen again.
Yeah, if I have a great show, I will never want to change booth places. I'm like, I need the same place. They have to come back and find me. They have to do this. I'm like, I don't ever want to change. And, with all of the uncertainty that we deal with in this industry, I kind of hate doing new shows even. It's like, I like knowing it's not just the luckiness, it's the comfort of knowing, okay, I'm in front of this deli and they've got a decent tuna salads. I can go in and I can get a sandwich. I just like, I don't know, doing something new. Even like going to Cherry Creek this fall, and the fact that they've moved it to Labor Day and they're changing locations, I'm nervous. I don't like change.
I totally would be. I mean, I love Cherry Creek, and I would do it in a heartbeat whenever we get into it. But I did have that thought in my head about, with it being in a new spot, if those people who have the choice between Pearl and the choice between Cherry Creek, what would the tipping point be that Pearl's in its normal time slot?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And
totally.
people look forward to it as opposed to kind of a recreated event at a different time and place. Even though Cherry Creek is great.
Yeah, I trust the Cherry Creek people implicitly, but
they'll do their thing, but it's still, 4th of July, people know this is always going on. Yep. And it's almost like when that time period passes, unless they catch whatever media and stuff's going on, they might not, it's just out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, I trust that it'll work, but there's always a nervous energy whenever there's any kind of change. And it's so funny, like being artists, and you'd think that we'd be pretty open to new experiences and change and doing all this. I find artists in general to be not politically, but to be like very conservative. Like, I don't want any change. I want this to be exactly the same. I want to be able to trust that, I don't even want you to change your check-in location because I know where the check-in location is and I can double park and I can do this. And I don't know, it's so stressful. Like each show having its own different way of doing things. And when you change one little thing, that's when art be like, what do you mean Douglas isn't going to be my neighbor anymore? And it's hard.
It just comes to me that perhaps what it comes down to is our collectors pick up on our mood and our emotional state, our anxiety levels. And for us to be successful at a show, we kind of have to have a little bit of that edge of your seat anticipation, but also like we don't have a care in the world. Because if they pick up on the fact that we're worried about, like you said, all of these things we can't control, then it's almost like it's a turnoff, and they just kind of want to, trying to step out of our booth and get away from us.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I've talked a lot on this podcast about the slump buster of a show and trying to get your head right and doing that first show of the year and being. I talked to an old timer one time, and I mean, I'm probably an old timer now as far as having been in the industry for so long, but I was set up next to him and I came into the show and I'm like, we were talking about booth fees and the credit cards being maxed out and you've already paid, basically I'm a retail store. I'm open 12 to 25 weekends out of the year, and so you shit the bed on one of those weekends and you're in the tank, Totally. But anyway, I was talking to this old timer and I came in and he could kind of smell the desperation on me. And he's like, trying to make money in this business is like trying to get laid when you're horny. Like you just can't do it. You know what I mean?
You want it too bad.
Oh, they can smell the desperation on you. You're like, no, not that guy. No, let's not do here. So you got to open yourself up. You got to be likable. You've got to be present and not desperate and not breathing down people's necks when they're looking at the artwork. So it's a dance. And I don't know. I feel like I'm literally only on one foot. So we'll see how the dance goes. I don't want to talk about this goddamn foot at the art shows, Douglas.
I know. Like, it's like when we're at a show and it's windy, and I think glass people get it more than other mediums.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, aren't you worried your glass is going to break? It's like, I really don't want to sit and talk to you about this all day long about being worried about glass blowing over. I'd rather talk about our work, because it becomes the thing to talk about and then leave. It's like, nope. I don't.
Exactly.
So I can understand. You'd be like, you don't want the whole conversation to be about your leg.
That's what it's going to be.
And then they leave. Yeah. You want it to be about the work.
Right. And I don't want to talk, well, that's at night. I've got a scooter, one of the big with the knee pads, and I've got it set up so that I can put my knee down and then rest that Achilles that I blew out. So I've got that behind me, and I look like, there's no way you can't talk about that. Oh, you got a nice little scooter there. Oh, what'd you do to your foot? I'm like, I don't want to talk about it.
You're going to have to treat it as a segue. This piece was inspired by me blowing out my Achilles.
God, I don't want to talk about it. And I'm going to zip around on my little scooter, look like an idiot. So I'm not super psyched about that.
Yeah, well, that brings up a topic that interests me that we've, kind of leading into the fact of being an independent artist and the fact that we really are on our own and we don't have anyone else selling our work for us. We have to show up and connect with our collectors. And what is it about being an independent artist that appeals to you?
Basically, I think it's the fact that I can be just a huge asshole as an employee. So I can't work for anybody but myself. So I better be my own boss. So the fact that I can draw, that's what it is for me. I don't have any other choice. And the fact that I've worked for myself for so long, I've made myself completely unemployable. The fact that I can actually say what I want and what I mean to anybody at any time and express myself, I guess. I haven't spent an awful lot of time thinking about it, but what about you? I mean, what brings you to this and what makes, are you talking about the term itself, independent artist?
Just being an independent artist. I have chosen it because I don't want to do a financial split with a gallery because I feel like well, for one, it's the whole philosophy behind it. Me and Renee designed the work, we've made the work, and we're going to give over 50% of the sale to somebody else. We feel like we've done way more than 50% worth of the work. So it's kind of that philosophy of it. But then also, in fact, part of my success is interacting with our collectors. And I often feel like when you hand it over to somebody else to sell it for you, they don't do as good a job as what we would do. So I want that control.
I hear you. It definitely takes a certain amount of trust to develop that gallery relationship. And I do think that I can tell my own stories better, but I do have three galleries actually across the country. It's funny, I've got like East, Middle, and West, but I didn't intend to make it that way, but I do trust those galleries a lot. So, but it's taken a long time to have those relationships, but those are all people that I actually, those gallery owners I socialize with, I know them, I trust them, they know my stories. So sometimes they can sell that better than me. So that is part of my kind of diversifying my own business, is having those galleries that carry me through the tough times. But I know what you mean. Like, it is really hard to make a painting that I can go to a show and sell for $3,000 and get $1,500 for.
Yeah, that's rough.
It's a tough one. So I've got it. So there are only certain things that I will sell at shows, and it's actually brought my prices up a little bit too, so that it's given me the confidence, because I'm like, talking to the gallery owners, I'm like, you know what, I can't sell this piece for less than $3,000. I got to have $3,000 from it.
Yeah.
He's like, Will, it's a $6,000 painting. Then you got to sell it for $6,000 at the show. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Okay, maybe that's, maybe it is. Maybe maybe you're selling it at wholesale then it shows.
It's true. Well, I think part of me and Renee's particular issue is we tried the wholesale market, and this is kind of different than, say, painters, but like, the craft market, the buyer's market type shows. And we were in a game with these big production studios, and we did not fit there. We worked with 100 galleries one year, and it almost killed us. And what I really hated was I want this, I want it for this price, and a small and a medium and a large, and then filling those orders and operating like a factory when we're a one-of-a-kind business. So I walked away from that saying that was the hardest year. And it happened during the crash. So a lot of these galleries were going under and trying to manage where the money was coming from and who was paying us and who wasn't paying us. And I just walked away from it and said, nope, that doesn't work for me. This independent show life is what works for me. And I would love to kind of go back into, like, you have 3 galleries. I would love to have these relationships where I say, here's the work that we're willing to have you get in a price point that will vary based on size, but I'm not going to try and make it fit into this puzzle mold of structure. It has to be loose.
That's what those, there are wholesale shows out there, that ACC Baltimore show, when I helped my wife do it, she really loves that show. She's got great relationships with the galleries that show up, but I can't remember a couple of days of wholesale and then like 3 or 4 days of retail.
Oh, right.
So she sets her booth up completely differently. She was like, well, here's my wholesale collection. Here's what I'm willing to take half of. Mm-hmm. So you can set it up that way, but I get what you mean. You don't want to do these pieces as feel like a factory, and I get it. And it's hard. It's a different business model, but I respect the balance of it. The people that can have those relationships and the ones that have multiple galleries across the country. I can only handle. I would like to pick up one more, but the 3 seem to be about it. Yeah. Keeping them happy is about all I can do.
Yeah, I also felt when the pandemic happened, we felt really vulnerable and on our own being in this kind of business. We all were like, we're our own bosses, and at first we didn't know we were going to get any kind of help or any kind of aid, or we knew we didn't qualify for unemployment until they created a federal unemployment program for people like us. But there was that moment of, what have we gotten ourselves into being independent artists?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, it's all very precarious. The injury that I have has kind of brought that home too. It's like you have a full year of nothing happening, and now all of a sudden I'm back to work, and all of a sudden I can't walk. So relying on that, it's been a challenge for sure. I don't have the inventory going into my shows that I typically would. I haven't worked like to create work. What I've been doing, talking about those galleries, is just pumping them full of my new work. Yeah. And then they've been successful enough. One of them is in a resort community, and during their ski season, I was just crushing it, And so I was just shuffling off all of my work. And luckily, one of my galleries is in Chicago. I've got a great relationship with them. I had a show, sold the small and medium pieces. I have 4 or 5 big pieces, and that's what I've got. That's what I'm going to show.
Okay. All right, there you go. Well, I feel coming out of the pandemic and getting back to this, there is a sense of enthusiasm amongst all of us artists. Like, we're going to see each other again. We're going to see our collectors again. And it's going to inspire more work. It's going to inspire new directions. So I'm looking forward to that whole aspect of this next stage of where we're at.
Yeah, I sit in my booth and I try to look busy and not be on my phone. And so I'll have a little sketchbook, and that's where I start getting ideas, I'll just sit there and start sketching and putting things together. So I'm excited about that. Excited about the energy. And a lot of times you have a new piece and you don't know what people think. And getting that reaction and having people come in inspires more work.
Well, we should probably move on because we've got a couple of big interviews today. First, you sat down and talked with John Ames and Michelle Friedman with Artist Intersection, and they're going to tell us about the digital artist co-op they created about a year ago and has been going strong all year long.
So I've been talking to John and Michelle for a long time about their project with Artist Intersection and been participating throughout the last year, and it's gone well. Their Instagram presence is strong, and it's a nice kind of pat your back and you pat mine kind of thing. And
yeah, and this month you happen to be the featured artist, isn't that right?
How convenient.
How
exactly.
Convenient.
So it's nice. They put a nice little feature together for me. So.
And it looks great. I mean, I shared it on my social, and it looks really great. Your work looks great, and how they're presenting your work is awesome. So it's cool.
It is cool, and I appreciate them very much sitting down with me and talking about the project.
And the theme has been for the last year and moving forward is not putting all our eggs in one basket. So having other streams of revenue coming in based on our art business is important. So it'll be good to learn from them and see what they've got to offer.
Yeah, I talked to John and Michelle, and that was really exciting. But then a completely different personality on this episode, too, is talking to David Bjurstrom.
Absolutely. Your talk with him, I found extremely interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to David because he's one of the guys I didn't really know that well, and his online presence is so different. I was David's next door neighbor at Fort Worth, and here's this quiet, kind of shy unassuming guy. And I'm like, your online presence is a lot stronger than your personality.
He has a very big personality online, that's for sure.
He's really opinionated. I tend to agree with a lot of his opinions, but he'll take you head on if you don't. But I really loved sitting down and talking to him and kind of putting a more personal touch with the rest of the work that we've all kind of admired for so long. So freaking talented.
He sure is. But first, we're going to jump in with just a short interview with John Ames and Michelle Friedman telling us about their artist intersection, and then we'll get into your really great conversation with David Bjurstrom.
The Independent Artist welcomes John Ames and Michelle Friedman. I'd just like to welcome you guys. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about this artist intersection that you guys started. You started it with Deb Novak, correct?
Well, and actually the first person to approach us on it was Suzanne Abbott.
Oh, nice.
About March.
In March, okay. So right when everything kind of went down.
Yeah.
A lot of those things kind of popped up. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you guys is because yours is still around. But a lot of them, there were a lot of different kind of little groups, different people had kind of tried to do like virtual art fairs, virtual things that were happening, and Instagram groups that started and then lost steam and kind of died. What I found interesting with you guys, it's still kicking, and you've actually had a pretty good deal of success with it.
Well, thank you. There have been a few people that have been a very important part of Artist Intersection. They may not be active principals at this point, but they've all had a huge contribution in making Artist Intersection what it is today. Allison Antleman was another person that was instrumental very early on. And then Deborah Adelson got the site up and running. And we had our launch in June. John was always part behind the scenes. As you remember, he did some graphics to help out and with branding.
My involvement at the beginning was a sounding board. I actually had COVID-19 as things were cranking up. So I was always like, in my fogginess was always like, I want to really dig into this, and just couldn't. And things started clicking along really well with Deb, Michelle, and for a short time, Allison. But then what really started happening is everybody's involved. The artists started to participate. There were definitely people behind the scenes kind of building what you see, like the infrastructure of the website. And that was all Deb.
Artist Intersection is a place where collectors and artists meet. We wanted to try to create an art fair online for people to attend because there weren't any shows. So, and that's why we have different media. It's not just jewelry or wearables, 2D, ceramics, metal. We wanted to have a virtual art fair. Also kind of like a lifestyle magazine. That is a goal of Artist Intersection. And we've had a few shows, virtual shows, with links that connect directly to artist websites.
Right. They're one of the ones that you guys did, and I know about it because my wife, Susan Elnora Jewelry, participated in the, I believe it was the Valentine's Day. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Valentine's Day
pop-ups.
Yep.
So you did a pop-up, and it was a multiple sharing of email lists, and I know she had a great, like an actual show, like a real show.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the folks that participated did as well.
Yes.
Part of that, I think, was a kick in your own ass to try to get something up and going for Valentine's Day. But then you have so many of the other things that were up there that worked together. I know she had a few sales from other people's mailing lists.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, I wanted to talk to you guys because it's so many of these virtual fairs do not work.
I agree.
Because we have such a hands-on business. But there's something that's happening with you guys that's working a little bit different, and that's why I wanted to reach out.
So the Valentine's Day pop-up is modeled after another organization's model for a virtual show, and that is the Chicago Art Girls, which I'm part of. At that point, it was a much smaller virtual show. Flash forward to when the pandemic first started, we knew that it was about Mother's Day. We had an idea to do another virtual show where there is a universal coupon code and all of the participants agree to use that coupon code from their individual websites. And we all agreed to a certain percentage off to incentivize customers to buy during a specific time. And we all agreed to do a certain amount of promotion online and email blasts and so on. And that model has proven to be quite successful. And so that is the basis for it. And it does work. And I agree that there has to be, you have to sweeten the pot a little bit in order to incentivize. Yeah. And we don't have large booth fees or no travel costs. So to take a small discount off the top, it works really well.
Yeah, that does work. I can see like with you guys doing that, and you have a small group of people that's sharing an email list. I see that working. Yeah. Whereas sharing my email list with an entire show to me seems like a bad idea. Like there's no way I'm going to do it. I don't want my people, barraged with hundreds of emails all year long and then get tired of me. Right. So your model, like something pulling a small group out of that virtual show, to me somehow works a little bit better. I mean, it makes a lot more sense.
I mean, honestly, everybody's scrambling because they're just trying to make something work, get some revenue going. When these shows do these virtual shows, they're trying to replicate the show in cyberspace, whereas Artist Intersection is something that exists 365 days a year. So there's this, whatever's going on, it's always there. And as much as the shows have websites, it's like, okay, it's about the show. Right. So it comes and it goes. And yeah, we have done, and we're going to do more special events. But in the background is always this, as Michelle said, lifestyle magazine, an intersection where artists can meet each other, where collectors can meet artists and collectors can meet each other as well. I mean, it's, some of it's sloganeering, but it really is an earnest attempt to bring people together.
Right. I mean, that is, like you said, the thing about virtual shows, it's like the internet is open 24/7. People don't use the internet for a weekend.
No, right. When people go to art fairs, they want to get to know the artists. I mean, you can buy art in all kinds of places. Why go to an art fair? And Artist Intersection is an extension of that experience where you get to know a little bit about the person who's selling the work, and they are actively participating in that. So it's not just us doing that.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm willing to just see what each artist wants to do.
Yeah. The more we participate, the bigger it gets. And I hear you virtually kicking my ass as well.
No.
Point taken.
We're all doing things that we're not used to doing now. Doing stuff that you're not used to doing can be scary and not fun, but it can also be exciting and interesting. So I'm hoping we can be more like that.
This platform it's not going away. Yeah. It's a way to enhance one another. The shows will enhance the virtual marketplace, and the virtual marketplace will enhance the in-person marketplace. Yeah. They go hand in hand. And that's the best way to look at it for the long term.
Yeah, it is. And I see, I appreciate the way you guys are looking at it and the way you've kind of set it up. And a lot of these things, like I said, have lost some energy. So I appreciate you guys keeping it going. So yeah, thanks for sitting down with me and talking to me about it.
That's nice seeing you.
Love seeing you guys. Thanks so much.
Good to see you. Thank you.
I will.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye now.
We are proud today to welcome David Bjurstrom here to the podcast. David makes his home in Austin, Texas. He's been inspired to pursue art as a career since early on in junior high school. He spent over 35 years capturing the world around him. David started out in watercolor and oil painting, but quickly came to settle on working only in pencil. There's a magic to being a master in your craft that way. David is an award-winning artist, and we are proud to welcome him to the podcast to get a little insight into the man behind the pencil. So I just want to kind of jump right in, and you are kind of the first person, like we know each other from shows, we've been neighbors, but I don't know you really well. I've been kind of taking the easy way out and talking to just some people I know that are pretty close. Like the Clifton interview, I was just like, I mean, he and I are friends, so I can just I can just chat. But I know you much more through just kind of Facebook interactions than face to face.
Well, yeah, that's the same with me for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's nice to sit down and talk with you. Kind of want to pull the curtain back because you have a Facebook presence that is you shy away from nothing, which I admire.
Well, I tend to jump in on a lot of things, and sometimes I need to just say, you know what, not my monkeys, not my circus, but I really like circuses. So, I jump in.
I admire that. And it's funny, like a lot of times, like you and Carla Fox will jump into a topic and Carla terrifies me sometimes. I'll admit it. I don't mind letting her know that. She has her opinions and she will just eviscerate you if it's a topic.
She's a dear friend, but she terrifies me at times too. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen here, but let's go for it.
But it's, you pull no punches. You get out there and which is kind of why I wanted to talk to you, because when I've met you at shows too, you're more of kind of a gentle presence. You're a little bit more shy in person. And
and that's really true. And most people who at least know my Facebook presence would be surprised to hear me say that I am a painfully shy person. It's something all my life has been difficult for me. I have to force myself to be out in the public and to talk to people, and to talk on the telephone is just, it horrifies me. I hate it. The phone rings and I just cringe. And I'll be honest, even the thought of doing this Zoom meeting this morning with you, even though there's no threat to it, it still kind of gives me that little bit of inside feeling of, ooh, do I really want to do this?
Yeah, I'm with you. Douglas he researched a lot of how we do this and what the best way to do it. And he likes a lot more personal contact. And he and I talk on the phone to talk through these things. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, could you just text me?
Right, I know. Exactly.
Yeah. So the thought of actually having to see people face to face, I'm with you sometimes, but I'm kind of more of the perfect combo of introvert, extrovert. So if I get out there and do the shows, then I can exercise that extrovert. But then at the end of it, I'm like, don't talk to me anymore. I want to go away.
Well, for the phone, part of me that I hate so much, and it's in my background, is that I worked for about 15 years in customer service and eventually as a supervisor for Harry and David, which is the catalog gift company. And
yeah, of course.
The phones would ring and you'd never know what you get. And it just terrified me. And I got to the point where I absolutely hated telephones. And because of that, so I'm still learning to deprogram myself for that.
You've still got PTSD from it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you, was it an arts-based thing as far as like Harry and David? Is that what you did customer service, but did you do catalog
No,
work?
Harry and David is food and fruit gifts.
Right.
They're, so there was no art basis to it at all. And actually the sister company was Jackson and Perkins, which is roses and garden products. And they're both major catalog companies at the time and important companies and prestigious, but still, customer service is not my favorite thing. It still isn't.
No.
As many people.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like if you're that shy and you don't want to talk to the public, how does that translate into selling your work? Like, how does that work?
It's difficult. And actually years ago when I first started this, a good friend really pointed out to me that I have two people. I have the private person that's at home that is around people. And then I have the public character that I put on when I go to a show. And it's like being an actor, I guess. I realize that it's a role I have to play. Like it or not, I go out there, I become my public person and I talk and interact and be friendly. And then, as you said, when I go home, I don't want to deal with that. I just want to be alone.
Yeah, it's exhausting. I mean, you get home and it's exhausting not only is what we do grueling, but it's kind of psychologically grueling to be out there in front of the public.
Yeah.
Is it harder for you? Like I actually enjoy going and doing like your Fort Worths and things where you're like 3 and 4 day shows. I like setting up shop. I really dislike setting up and then breaking down the very next day. Those 2-day shows are too grueling, I feel like. But do you like that, or is that harder?
It doesn't bother me so much. Sometimes I think 4-day shows are just too much. By the time, I can be really enthusiastic, and I notice this about myself. On the first day and the first morning, I can be very enthusiastic about talking to people and answering every question that I've heard 10,000 times. I'll answer it very enthusiastically. But by the end of the 4th day, I'm kind of thinking to myself, if somebody asks me that question one more time, I'm going to shoot them. Right. And it's hard. So, the longer the show, the more difficult it is. And I've done long ones in my days when I was still doing the Western art and an Annapolis circuit. I used to do a 10-day show in the Las Vegas Convention Center during the National Finals Rodeo. And that was just, hell. I wanted to kill myself at the end. If it wasn't for the really good money I was making, I would have.
Yeah, and then that is not necessarily an art buying. It's probably an art buying. You wouldn't have been there if it wasn't, but like an art educated for the most part crowd.
Right. These are people that are off the ranch. They live out in the middle of nowhere, and this is their big trip for the year. They come to Las Vegas, and not to deride people with a lifestyle, but they aren't there to interact with some silly artists. They're there for their Western lifestyle and have fun in Vegas.
Right. Over the years, I've started looking at some of those longer shows where you just don't make much money on your Thursdays and Fridays as, okay, I'm here for the show, and then the show is here for me on Saturday and Sunday. So I have to try to save myself. I can't get out there and then a lot of times I've done that Oklahoma City show, which is pretty grueling, your Tuesday, and you're there at they used to do it. I haven't done it in a number of years, but you're there for patrons awards breakfast at like 7:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, and you're there until Friday, and people are gesturing at your work with turkey legs and nacho cheese. And it's grueling, but you gotta, I feel like with that one, they're kicking your tires all week long, and then Sunday they might come around and buy. So you have to save something for yourself.
Yeah, and it's part of the business, and we complain about it, but man, there are far worse things in the world to do, and I've done a lot of them in my life, and I wouldn't change this out for anything. Yeah, I get tired of it, but boy, I feel incredibly lucky to do what I do and make a good living at it, and being recognized for it. That's really lucky.
Yeah, it really is very lucky. I feel the same way. Not to complain about what we do, because it's more fun to talk about the things we don't like, I guess, than it is the stuff that we do. But it is incredibly rewarding, and we haven't had that rush of the sale, that person-to-person sale in a whole year. Yeah. So after an entire year of not doing shows, do you look at it any differently? Do you feel like you want to jump back out there and do as many as you can, or are you looking at it a little differently? Yeah.
I'm anxious to get back out and do the shows. I really want to do it. I love getting the direct feedback from people. But I think what I've learned over this last year is that I don't need to be doing a lot of shows. I can be really selective. I can do the shows that I really want to do. And if there are shows that I don't like to do or that are more difficult for me to do, I don't need to. I actually, oddly enough, had a year that doing no shows, I had enough sales in patrons that came to me and made some nice size purchases and commissions that came to me, that in the end, even though I didn't sell as much work, I actually made almost exactly the same amount of money as I did in 2019 because I had no expenses. I wasn't traveling. I was just sitting here at home working. So amazing. That was the education to me. Whoa, if I'm out there just spending money on random shows that aren't necessarily really making me happy, why do
That's what I found a lot of people have said. That's what Clifton said last week. That's what, everybody kind of wants to do less. Yeah. Cliff's got a baby on the way, so he wants to be at home more. I'm much happier at home too. And I kind of call it, and I've got him scheduled to talk to you next time, but I call it the Daryl Thetford model. Mm-hmm. Daryl loves to boil it down into just the select. And, what are the most important shows in my... If I'm not having fun at it, if it's grueling, I don't want to be there. And I've learned that too. I just don't have to be out there on the road.
Yeah. And I actually learned that from Chris Dahlquist, who, is kind of the expert in all things art shows and art fairs and artists. And, she doesn't kill herself with 100 shows a year. She selects the ones that are good for her, and she diversifies her business. And that's so smart. And it's kind of the direction I want to go. I need to follow her advice more, but that's where I really want to go.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring her up because she's Monday.
Oh, great, cool.
So by the time yours airs, we'll already have heard from her. So what I love about her, and we learned kind of last week, is that she milks every last bit out of every show she does. It's not just the show up and show model, which a lot of people, and me included, have had over the years. It's like, okay, this is an advertising thing. This is a business thing. Why are you not following up? If people want to come see your studio, set up the appointment, et cetera.
Right.
So it's been, yeah. So, hey, how did you get your start with this? You did Harry and David for 15 years, but where were you trained?
Well,
and how did you?
I went to art school in Oregon, a small private school called Oregon College of Art, a minimal little program. And I look back at it now, and it kind of was not a very good education. It was probably a bit of a waste of money, but I had one teacher who happened to be the one that taught the drawing classes that had been doing the Western art shows and in that Western art circuit. And we became friends, and he invited me to show my work with him a couple of times. And I got the bug. I started doing a few of the Western art shows. I was still working at the time for Harry and David, and that was my full-time job. That's what paid the bills. But I was slowly building this art business on the side by doing the Western art shows. And those shows are similar to these fine art, fine craft shows that we're doing now, except they're primarily indoor shows, and they're a much smaller patron base. And they were successful for me. I did well. I kind of reached the level that I was going to reach. There's a kind of a stratospheric group of people in that business, but it's one where you have to know the right people and be nice to the right people to get into that. And that was just not going to happen. And I experimented.
You couldn't let your opinions be known.
Yeah. And I had heard about, I guess it was Art Fair Jackson Hole. And I thought, Jackson Hole, that's sort of Western. I can go try that. And I did that one year. In 2007, I did that show. And I'd also applied for Art in the Pearl in Portland that year. And amazingly enough, got into it and did Art in the Pearl. And I won one of their Best of Show awards that year, the first time out of the gate. And that
was your first year doing shows.
Yeah.
Then awesome.
And that hooked me. And from there, I kind of expanded into La Quinta Arts Festival, which again became really successful for me, both in sales and recognition. And it just grew from there. I had done a few shows here and there, and I remember being at some show somewhere, and I think it was a jeweler that was looking at my work and very complimentary about the work and saying, you should really try to get into this show in Fort Worth. It's called Main Street Fort Worth. It's a hard show to get into. You'll never get into it. It's really impossible. And I kind of looked at him and said, well, I applied a couple of months ago and I'm invited. I'm doing it. And his jaw sort of hit the ground that I'd made it the first time in. But so, it just sort of grew on its own, and I expanded into various shows and listening to other artists and which shows to get into. And I stupidly didn't know that I wasn't good enough to get into the St. Louis Art Fairs or the Cherry Creeks or whatever. I started applying to them and got in, and it just happened.
Amazing. Yeah. And I mean, that's what kind of starts a career, is those first kind of things. It's like, I remember getting into the Grove the first time and only having enough to hang a booth for a booth shot, right. And enough to, and then you get in and it's far enough away. Then you can panic and be like, oh my God, now I have to create the actual body of work.
Yeah. And I look back now at the work that I was doing at the time that I got into these shows. And it's only 14 years ago, but still it's evolved so much since then. And it makes me cringe just a little bit. And it makes me wonder how in the world I got into those shows, but apparently somebody saw something. So.
Well, I mean, I think too, when you're working with kind of a fresh voice and it's not something that people have seen, your style is very unique.
Yeah.
And to see that, I mean, and it's the first I did find that first year with my body of work, it was a little bit easier to crack into some of the things when I'm saying something new, and maybe that sticks out to the jury. And then, you think after you've gotten into those, you're like, oh, well, I can do it every year.
Yeah.
And then that's where it really, to me, it's like sometimes that second and third year, like they've seen, and then you have to start coming up with new things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's been the advantage of working in a medium that very few people do. I mean, there's just a handful of us out there that are working in graphite. And, when I'm at a show, it would be surprising if there are three of us. Usually I'm the only one. And that makes it stand out. It makes people remember me. And having the odd name that nobody can pronounce, more often than not in the early years, people would come to my booth and say, oh, you're the guy with the funny name, but I really like your work.
Oh.
Yeah, so I had a combination of factors that worked out really well to be memorable and get me through that door, I think.
I was going to talk about this later, but this is a nice segue. We have all influenced other artists over the years, and, Cubism became a movement because of Picasso. Right. But when you have somebody that just outright copies your technique and your method and your booth, how are you handling? You have a tribute artist that's out there. I stopped by to say hi to you at Artisphere, I think it was one year, and it was like I felt like my heart stopped. I mean, it was not you. It was somebody else just aping you. And it really made me mad. So I can't imagine how.
It was interesting. I hadn't been aware of this person at shows. And a dear friend, another artist, Amy Flynn, I'll drop her name, mentioned to me that she had seen this person. And, I thought, well, I'll look him up. And I went to the website and opened up the website and I went, wow, that's interesting, because there's a lot of my subject matter, the skies and whatnot. Okay, fine. I don't have a limit on skies. And then I got looking a little deeper, and there are elephants, and there are southwestern pots, and there are trees. And wow, these are my subjects in my medium. And I upset initially, and then it just kind of annoyed me more than anything, because obviously this is somebody that has a lot of talent and a lot of ability, and I applaud that, and I'm glad to have more people in my medium working at shows. I mean, I think that only helps all of us to be more, to have graphite recognized. But what to me seemed like the obvious copying really, it hurt, it annoyed me, it made me angry. There was a whole range of emotions, and there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it. And I really didn't do anything about it. But
right.
I look at it and I kind of say, okay, well, I know I'm better. And I've had my collectors say, yeah, you're better, but still, it's hard.
Yeah, we talked last week with Clifton about finding your authentic voice and not chasing rainbows and waterfalls. And the lack of authenticity is glaring.
Yeah.
I don't know. It makes me angry. I can't imagine living a life like that and not being able to have any art show friends, because everyone knows what that person has done.
Yeah.
Michael Cole has a tribute artist, and he to the point where he even copied the color of his walls. Yeah. And changing the color of their walls so that they look like him every time. Yeah. And it's just, how do you go through, and no one will really talk to that person. And it just kind of, I know I used to know that those folks, and I just kind of avert my gaze. It's just like, it's kind of depressing. It's sad. It's not, they're trying to be something that they're not.
Yeah. And it is sad. It's unfortunate that this person is doing it, that my person is doing it. I had learned through other friends that the artist that this person is married to is also doing the same thing with their work virtually copying another artist. And like the two of them are doing this and showing their work at shows around the country. And it's work that obviously is skilled, but it's a copy of someone else. And I'm just trying to go, right. How can you do this?
Yeah. I mean, your technique to me is it's so skillfully done, but it's like, you have to have the talent in order to go after a David Bjurstrom. You've got to come with your weapons. Yeah. But it's just, so that brings me to jurying shows. You've juried a lot of the very top shows in the country. And I feel like it's incredibly important to have somebody like you, somebody that's one of us, that is on some of the shows don't like to have an art show artist on the jury. I think it's incredibly important so you can see through the bullshit, right, and you can recognize the tribute, the real deal from the fake.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important because I'm out there on the street. Well, actually, Clifton, he and I both did the St. Louis Art Fair jury this last year. We were on the same jury and together, and yeah, I mean, we're both seeing things that come up and realizing, this is not really kosher. And we caught some things that were not good. And St. Louis, as is their habit, and, good or bad, they send out information after the jury to artists with comments that were made in the jury process. Well, with the new director, they copied virtually everything that was said in the jury process, which is a little bit much. And some of the comments got to people who then I had feedback directly from artists.
Oh, man.
There's no way to know that I made the comments. There's no way to know which juror made the comments, but I at least got feedback. I'm sure other jurors did too. Maybe Clifton did. And they were not pleasant. And I was really taken aback by it. And it felt almost like being stalked for a little while there.
Yeah. I'm sure. You have to be given the opportunity to say whatever you want.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point. Is in the jury, we have to be able to be free to talk about things. If we see things, to bring it up and discuss it. It's not necessarily things that are for the public to know that we're talking about. I mean, we're not. I've never been on a jury where we've talked about artists in negative light or personalities. It's always about the art when we're talking, and there are things about the art when jurors are talking that just need to remain in the jury room. Just like in a courtroom jury, there are discussions that stay with the jury room, and then you hear the results. And anyway, and in that case, they escaped the vacuum, and it got a little weird for a while. And
broke down the third wall.
Yeah. And I love doing the jurying. I think it's such an important thing. And I think every artist really should have the experience at least once, because it will open your eyes. But there are some potential downsides to it.
Yeah, I can imagine that doesn't win you any friends if you're being perfectly honest about everything. I feel like, what people think about me and my art sometimes is maybe none of my business.
Right.
So I do have a hard time with that St. Louis jury system, because it's super easy to go back in, figure out the number, and look at somebody else.
Right.
And I don't really want everybody knowing necessarily what I'm jurying with, the images that I'm using, the order that I'm using. I don't, we've talked a lot online. I've been on some of the same threads about like the booth shot, and to me, the booth shot is the great equalizer. Like you can go to art school. I came out of art school with, at least 4 to 6, portfolio pieces that I feel like right now I could throw into a jury and jury into.
Yeah.
But I'd be leaning them up against a card table. I have no idea how to display them, no idea how to whatever. I feel like that booth shot can be an equalizer. So I don't necessarily want it. Like, you can fool me with your art, but you can't fool me with the booth. Right. It's like, well, if you're hanging on a wire rack, we don't want you in the show. Yeah. I mean, you got to grow up. Yeah, and you have to show your work.
It's incredibly revealing. The booth shot is hugely revealing. It tells you everything you really need to know. And that being said, I often, when I'm a juror, kind of forget to look at the booth shot. I have to force myself to look at it and glance at it and say, okay, yeah, that's good. But still, it's really important. It's not it's not usually the decision of whether or not somebody gets into the show, although there have been cases where some really great work didn't get in because the booth shot was just horrendous.
Right. I mean, it's just kind of a reality check for me when I see the booth shot. I mean, it's like, okay, here's the art. You look through those 4, and then you go to the booth shot, and you're like, okay, you're real. Yeah. Go through. I mean, it's not real. I'm not like, I don't really care if you have a bag underneath it. People are like, clean up your space and all of this. I just want to know if it's a real thing. Yeah. And some of us have done, I've seen some of them, it's just like clearly just an iPhone shot, but it's a solid booth. Right. And I'm not, that's all I'm looking for.
Yeah, there are online groups of criticism for booth shots, and I see people jumping in and talking about little tiny adjustments of this and that, and bring your tablecloth to the floor and make sure everything is lined up exactly perfectly. And I'm going to say, you know what? As a juror, I take about 2 seconds to glance at the booth shot. If it looks reasonable, if it looks like they're professional, that's it. I don't look back at it. I'm not sitting there taking an hour and a half analyzing every little bit. I don't care. Right. That doesn't matter. And I see some of the criticisms online, and I just want to scream and say, do a solid, clean booth shot. Shows who you are. That's all that's required.
And have it real. Yeah, don't pay somebody to Photoshop your stuff onto some pro panels and show up in an easy up and with a blue plastic tarp, because I've seen that too. Because you're never going to get back in again. I mean, that's going to really make somebody mad.
Yeah. And actually, no matter how good the Photoshop job is, jurors can tell. I mean, it stands out. It looks too perfect, and you just realize, no, there's no way this is a real booth shot. And that'll count against you.
So, yeah, it will. Hey, what works for you and what doesn't as far as jury systems go? Like, what do you prefer? You've done them all, I think.
Well, I really love being in the room with the other jurors when the images are being projected, because even though some of those rounds are just kind of you're voting, you're not talking, it gets to a point where you do have discussions back and forth, and it really clarifies your feeling, because there is some work that comes up that I see and I think, well, yeah, I'm not sure I get it, but sell me on it. And somebody else, another artist or another juror, will say, I really like this because, and that convinces me. Or if I really like something and somebody pops up and says, oh man, this looks just exactly like X artist and there's nothing original about this. Oh, okay. That influences me too. So I really like to have that discussion that's going on in person. I've done the home computer jurying where nobody else is in the room and you're just going through it one by one and scoring them. And that's okay. You can take a lot of time scoring them, but every single time I've done that, I give them a score and I think, what if I'm the outlier? What if everybody else hates this and I've given them a 5, or I give them a 1 and everybody else gives them a 5? Am I going to look like the fool? So I find myself questioning what I'm scoring, and it's hard. And
are you able to kind of shuffle through things and just be like, okay, let's just cut the fat really quick?
There's a lot of it that just is obvious that it doesn't belong on a show. I would say there's easily 25% that you can just say, no, there's no way this belongs here. And then there's 10 or 20% that absolutely is clearly got to be part of the show. And then there's a big middle ground where you really have to slave over it and figure out, what's good, what's not good. Why do I like this? Why do I not like this? Why am I scoring it this way? And that's hard.
And That is hard. There's a contingent of people online that think that art show artists should not be on a jury, that it should be just a, I don't know, where do you stand on that? I mean, I know we've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but
I think it's really important because we have seen so much work. I mean, we have seen it all, and we know good work. And there are people who think, oh, if I as a drawing artist am judging jewelry or judging ceramics, that's not right. That's not my expertise. I beg to differ because I've been to hundreds of shows. I've seen thousands of artists. I know good work when I see it. And I may not know how to throw a pot. I may not know how to form a piece of metal into a beautiful piece of jewelry, but I understand what is good work and what isn't good work. And that's the important thing. I don't necessarily need to understand every step of the technique of what's good and bad about it. And same for me. When I submit my pencil drawings, I don't expect the jeweler to understand every step that I go through to produce my drawings. I expect they're going to look at it and say, this is really good work. And, at your base as an artist, the experience that you have and seeing so much work over time, you know what's good, you know what's not, and that's what's important. When you have academics or people who are not artists on the jury, that's fine. It's a different opinion. But I think you need to have the artists there to give that experience and to really talk about what they know and what their experience is to that work.
Right. You've been on the streets. You've seen so much. Yeah. I mean, we both have. So it kind of it does stick out as far as like what should be. And I think those other shows that don't want an art show artist, a lot of times you'll get this wild card contingent where you walk through and you're like, well, what the hell is happening here? Right. And you can see through it.
Yeah. And it's hard. The part of the difficulty in being a juror is that you really have to set aside your own prejudices, because there's work that comes up in the jury that I just absolutely don't like. But that doesn't mean it's not good work. And I can recognize if it's done well. It may not be something that I ever want to hang in my house, but I can look at it and say, yeah, this is really good work for what it is. And, I think that's the experience of an artist, and knowing what the art world is, at least in our art world, knowing what that is and how to make sense of it and how to put together a show. And, that's ultimately what we're doing. We're building the show. We're selecting it. We're curating it. I heard Clifton use that word, that the jurors are curating the show. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're selecting 200 artists that will work together as a really great show.
Right. You take pride in that. Do you ever run across juries that let people in that you can clearly tell you have not let into the show, that you've not accepted?
Oh yeah, there are things that I see in shows. I mean, I not to sound snobbish, but I really limited myself to the higher end shows, the quality shows, and they, for the most part, avoid that issue where you've got work that gets in that shouldn't. For the most part, there's very, very little of that happening. But some shows you do walk the show and you kind of think, wow, that one got through somehow. And maybe.
But there are are they honest with you about like the free passes? I know that on some shows they were like, well, everybody gets a take, and like, here's my guy, I'm going to get that person in, or like one or something like that.
I've been on those juries, and I've never found a juror, either an artist or an academic or professional or whatever you want to call them. I've never found anybody that has used that get in free card in a bad way, to try to get somebody in just because they're a friend or just because they want it. I've always found it to be very valid, and I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to. The St. Louis jury is one of those where jurors do get a card to say, this person is in. And I found that those people that are brought in are just because they somehow slipped through the cracks in the jury process. And there's so much good work that people do slip through those cracks. And it's just rescuing the good work. So I've not found an abuse of it. I've really not.
Good.
It's as a juror that, I mean, and really asking you this, but as a juror, the real potholes you run into are because I know so many people and I have a lot of friends, and you have to really step back from that and just say, you know what, I'm looking at the work. I'm not looking at the name on it, even though it's supposed to be a blind jury. I mean, come on. I know. Right. I know at least half the artists that are submitting. I could name them, but that's always challenging to have your friends' work come up, and when you're comparing apples to apples and saying, this particular entry they provided isn't really as good as somebody else's, and I'm not going to support them this time, and that's hard.
I'm sure that is hard, but I appreciate the integrity that it takes to form that. You're not just letting in your friends. You have to, because it's going to look bad on you if that ends up happening. You kind of look at it and see the show. There
are, because of Facebook, everybody can pretty well figure out if there's somebody who's a really good friend of mine, and if they're always in a show that I've juried, well, that starts raising eyebrows. And
but you're not friends with any hacks.
Yeah, well, that's true.
you keep pretty good company.
This is true.
Yeah. Are you? You've had an injury. We both have had injury setbacks this year. How's that affecting your season?
Well, it's fine. I've run into it. It's a tendon issue. It's not at all like what you've had, but it's been challenging enough because it's the IT band, and it really affects the stability of my whole leg. And when, I honestly was kind of for a few months thinking, oh, please, I hope Chicago doesn't happen, because I am not going to be in physical shape to be able to do it, and I don't want to have to turn it down. And when they came through and said, yes, we're going to do it, it put me in a very weird position of saying, okay, do I say, no, I can't? And it being the first show I've had in 15 months. Or do I just hope that in the 6 weeks before the show, I can get myself together to be able to do it? And I decided, I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure out how to do it one way or another. And I'm getting there. And
good.
I've got, after Chicago, I've got a couple of months, or I've got until September before the next show. And there are some procedures that I've got to have done during that time that hopefully will be in the break and will be cleared out of my calendar, out of my life before it's back to showtime again. But
get ready for that.
It affects your whole thinking about what I can and cannot do.
Yeah, I tried to get into the garage yesterday and go through my show stuff on crutches, and I'm picking through things. I can't lift anything. Yeah. I can't do anything. I just have an empty box that I'm trying to take up to my studio because we're trying to get up to we have a little lake place up in Minnesota. Right. And so we're trying to get up there for the summer. And I'm like, I can't do a damn thing. And I hate asking for help.
I know.
I'm
the same way. I have basically all my life, I've been essentially healthy. And suddenly, I turned 61 and everything started to break. And it's been a real challenge. And in the last 3 months, I've been kind of fighting 4 different layers of issues, and I'm slowly ticking them off, ticking the boxes and getting them out of my life. But it really changes your attitude. And oh my God, if there's one thing I want to say about it for artists, make sure you've got insurance. Good Lord. I mean,
seriously,
we'd have been just burned to the ground if we didn't have good insurance for the expenses that I've had over the last 3 months. And I had no idea.
It took me a while to get to that deductible. Well, it didn't take me a while, but I had a pretty high deductible and out of pocket. I'm like, oh, I met that pretty easily, pretty quickly anyway, and it's like, I'm asking my wife, anything you need to get done this year? Cause we have met it. The out of pocket has been matched.
I've been really fortunate. I mean, Bill, working for the University of Texas, we've got really great health insurance coverage, and my fear was that when he retired, which is happening right now, that I was going to be in this 3-year window of not having health coverage. But we've discovered that actually the health coverage from the university carries on for the rest of our lives. It's like, holy crap,
that's
we are
fantastic.
so incredibly lucky. And but anyway, it just, when I've looked at what the amounts that have been billed and the amounts that I've had to pay, I realized, wow, this would have been hell otherwise. So.
It's kind of eye-opening. Like, I don't like being next to somebody that can't roll their tent sides to open their booth.
Right.
Like, take care of your own shit has always been my own. I'm like, seriously, come on. You don't know how to make the triangle and roll the thing up. Like, it's art show 101. And now I find myself like, I'm hiring people. Right. So I've got somebody, but I find myself, I'm hiring these kids that are going to come in, and I hear that they're reputable, like these Chicago guys, but then I have, there's somebody that's going to help me set up in Des Moines, who's just another art show artist. He's the husband and just incredibly generous. And he's just like, the only thing I ask is pay it forward next time you have somebody that, it's just, it makes you kind of emotional when you start seeing your friends step up and help you when you need it.
I've had some incredible support and offers of help, and it been really lucky in the fact that Bill is retired as of now. He's going to be along with the rest of my shows for this season. And what I can't do, he's my built-in roadie. So thank God that's going to be covered. But,
this is your husband, Bill. Does he like shows? Does he like going to do them?
Can you really like shows when you're not doing them? I really, in my career, when I was just learning about this, I sometimes would follow along with friends and not be in the show, but be at the show. And it's great for about a half a day, and then you kind of want to go crazy. So being at a show without being the artist is difficult, and I sympathize with him for that. On the other hand, he's the best salesman of my work. I could just put up the work and sit behind the booth and turn him loose, and he'll sell the booth out. And so I'm really lucky that way, and he's very good about it. And he's much more outgoing.
What I found with my wife, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but with my wife's work, when I go out there and I'll sell with her, and it's easy to be a fan of somebody else's work. Be like, she's amazing. Isn't she great? But you can't really say like, yes, I am. Look at me.
Right.
Aren't I amazing? It's harder to say that about yourself. There is some humility that goes along with this.
I've always said, when we go to shows, when artists go to shows, when we set up our booths, as soon as everybody's booth is set up, then we all the artists just move one booth to the left, and you sell the work of your neighbor. So you're not having to talk about your work. You're talking about your neighbor's work, and you're selling your neighbor's work. And we could probably help each other out so much more if we're selling our own work. But,
it's true. It's a very socialist look at the whole thing. Can you imagine how it makes some people so upset, so angry? I don't know that I could talk about Amy and Phil's faux bats the way that Phil does. He's got a story for every single one of them, though.
It's funny. I've been next to them, and by the end of the show, I love Phil. I love Amy. By the end of the show, I could recite what he has to say better than he can.
Me too. I was next to him in St. Louis when he was like, "Oh, looks like you've got Bebo there," and so I'm like, "Oh God, I don't want to hear about Bebo anymore." Don't talk about Bebo.
We've laughed about that though together, and just like and I do that too. There are things that I say about my work, and I will tell artists, of course, up front. If I met somebody for the first time and they're my neighbor, I say, I apologize right now, because by the end of the show, you're going to be so tired of hearing me explain my answer to how long does it take, because it's just this automatic answer that comes out of my mouth without my even having to think about it, and so you're going to be bored with my saying it.
I'm the exact same way, and I'm not going to ask you that. I don't need to know. I'm good. I can see the work.
It's interesting. It's a question that I always hate, and for a long time I really danced around it and didn't give an answer. And I realized, what? I don't need to do that. And what surprises people is I am a whole lot faster than most people would imagine. And I think in some ways, when I'm honest about how long it takes me to do a piece of work, they're a little shocked and I think a little disappointed, because they want to think it's been months and months and months, when actually it's maybe been a few days of actual work.
Right.
So I have to think about that in terms of, what do people really want to hear?
Well, that's true. And you have your pat responses, and what's taken me a long time to learn is the fact that, and I have said this multiple times, but it's like you're the person in the bar that someone's trying to pick up almost. They're paying you a compliment, even if they're walking into your booth and ask, "Are these pictures?" Like what? It's an idiotic thing that they're saying, but they're still like, I'm responding to your work. I don't know what it is. I don't know how long it takes. I'm trying to kind of make a connection. And you don't know if the moron that you're talking to is standing next to somebody who is your next big collector.
Right.
So you've got to be on.
You really have to recognize that this is the first time that person has asked you this question. They don't know that every other person that's walked into your booth has also asked you the same question. Although I had a very funny experience. I don't know, it might have been St. Louis one year. Somebody walked into the booth and asked me how long it took. And I gave her my pat answer, which I try to customize each time, but I gave her the pat answer. And I had just finished that up, and somebody else walked into the booth while the first person was still there and asked me the same question: how long does it take? So I thought, okay, I've got to change up my answer a little bit. So I did. It was the same answer, but it was changed a little bit. And I could tell the first woman was chuckling just a bit. I hadn't even finished the last syllable of that second answer. And a third person walked in and asked the same question. The first two just busted out laughing before I even answered it, because they realized, oh, you get asked this a lot.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, we all have those top 5 questions.
Yeah.
It's like, I've kind of been getting away from the little splash of red that I've put in a lot of my work. I still do it because I like it. I like the device. I like that contrast. But it's like, for a while, I was getting that Schindler's List question. And it's like, I found it really insulting. I found it. And then I'm like, get over yourself. It's the same device. Yeah. It's like, it's the black and it's the white and it's the red, and you want to pay attention to the red so that you don't see the other things, and you see that first and then you notice the other things. So I'm like, okay, get over yourself. This is how it is. This is the question. And you've got to find, and I've said some obnoxious things to people in the past just to make myself laugh, but you never know who's listening. I don't want to. Yeah. So I'll engage the kids sometimes, like I just said, in order to let the shy people in the corner who are, just to tell them about your work.
I was listening to you. I think when you were talking to Clifton, you were talking about that, and I thought that is so true. I've actually used that device with jurors who have come into the booth and they're not talking to you; they're just there and looking.
Great.
But I've had some patrons there, and I thought, oh, I'm going to give my whole spiel about my work to this couple that's standing here looking, even though they haven't necessarily asked. I'm going to converse with them about it. So the juror that's standing over here is hearing it. I've played that game with jurors, and you can do that with patrons as well. But
that's really smart. I mean, that's a great point, because when the jurors come into your booth, they don't want to be cornered. They don't want to be, I always feel like I should be like tap dancing, and they're like, oh, hi, how are you? It's just, you try to be more likable than you really are, and it's just like, it never comes off as authentic.
Yeah, and I if they aren't asking me questions, I really tend to back off. I don't push them, but if I have somebody else in there that I can be feeding information to and let the juror hear, hey, I'll go for it.
Yeah. I mean, your work obviously speaks for itself, and you haven't had much of a problem with the juries in there. So congratulations.
I've been very fortunate. I still actually find it really kind of amazing, because when my work is picked out among some really incredible work at a big show, it still shocks me. I think, God, this juror was drunk when they picked me, but okay, great. I'll go for it.
I talked to Aaron Heckenberg about that. He's like, well, yeah, I want to make myself a 3-piece suit out of all the ribbons. And he's like walking to the awards breakfast going whoosh, 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 as he's walking down the street going, hey, does anybody know where the awards breakfast is?
I love that. Yeah. And not toot my own horn, but a few years ago, I finally just threw out a whole box of ribbons. I thought, what am I going to do with this stuff? And
you missed the mark. You needed to make yourself a suit.
Yeah, I should have. Yeah, that was what a loss, man.
Can you imagine walking into the tailor? So, And hey, it's been really great talking to you and catching up with you about this. Is there anything that you wish I'd asked you that you want to let people know?
Oh God, I guess people just need to know that I really am the asshole they see on Facebook. So
you've got this kind of snarky presence and you don't shy away from it. And it's so freaking funny to see your responses to things. I'm a little disappointed in talking to you that you kind of sound like Paul Lynde. Like there's like, oh yeah, well, I'm like, come on, I need a little, like I want the center square of Hollywood squares here. Like some of your responses to people are so classic.
Cleverness isn't really easy. It takes a lot of thought, you know?
It's great. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate that voice. Yeah, it's been really fun. I appreciate you sitting down with me.
Yeah, you bet. And it's good to do this. And I want to tell you, somebody needs to sit down and interview you and Douglas and turn the tables on the two of you for this podcast. No, seriously, because we want to know what makes you two work as well. So think about that.
All right. Cool. Yeah, we will. That's a great idea. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll sit here and try to think who I'd get to interview us. It'll be fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been great.
Cool. Well,
all right.
Have a fantastic show.
You too. Take care.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Wow, Will, that was great. I really enjoyed your talk with David Bjurstrom.
Thanks. It was really nice to be able to sit down and talk with him and just kind of have a cup of coffee and chat and hear the voice behind the work.
I love it when you refer to a copycat as a tribute artist. That's kind of a nice way to refer to it.
Man, it's really frustrating, and we've all dealt with that to some extent, but the idea that somebody could come in and imitate every aspect of it and actually try to trick a jury into thinking that it's you, I don't know. We all get our influences from other people. We draw from the art world around us. But man, that's a pretty zen way to handle that happening to you. I appreciated hearing his voice.
Well, it takes a lot of fortitude to have the confidence in your work that when somebody tries to copy your subject matter, but knowing that what you're doing is something special, because what he does is above and beyond what anybody else does. And I'll just say that not only is he able to recreate with precision these animals, the elephants and whatnot, but what he captures is the magnificence, the backgrounds that he's also presenting these subjects are just massive, and it is dynamic. And that is something that is special about him that nobody else can recreate.
Right. There is a depth and a soul to it and to his work that you cannot imitate or capture. So I appreciate that attitude of having a little bit of the, you might try to imitate me, but come at me. Right. You know what? I'm going to be changing. I'm going to be doing this my own way. And that's what I've found in my own work. I have challenged people that have tried to imitate a previous body of work, and it never goes well. It ends up ruining your show and be like, well, you go in and you think somebody's imitating you and you corner them on it, and it's just going to be a fight because they don't see, they might have seen your work, but it doesn't exist. A lot of these like little influences, it's not like your work doesn't exist in a vacuum. Right. So I don't know. It never goes like you think to try to challenge somebody on ripping you off or imitating you. So it's a really tough position to be in.
It's awful. It's awful to be in that position for sure. Yeah. So before we wrap here, we just wanted to do a quick shout out to this week's contributors to the podcast. Thank you to Keena Crow, Camille Marchez, and Jay McDougall. Thank you for sending money our way.
Yeah, I really appreciate those guys a lot. It really means a lot. We are trying to find some little advertising and some sponsorships along the way, and that's going very well. So some exciting things to keep the wheels on the wagon.
And if you would like to contribute to the podcast, you may do so through Venmo with the username The Independent Artist Podcast, or you can click on the PayPal link in our episode notes.
or you can reach out to us at independentartistpodcast@gmail.com if you're interested in sponsoring the show or having an ad on.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. And just as a reminder, we are now airing our episodes every other week.
That's right, Douglas. We have some exciting things planned coming up. Who do you have next on the podcast?
I had an extremely entertaining conversation with sculptor and mixed media artist Keena Crow. She got her start in the film business, and I tell you, with my theater background, we had a lot in common. It was a fun conversation.
That's awesome. Can't wait to hear that. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye, Will.
Bye, Douglas. Thanks.
This podcast has been brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
And while you're at it, check out Will's website at willarmstrongart.com and my website at sigworthglass.com.
And remember to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.